Welcome back to Weird Stuff in a Can. Today we're revisiting something. Fray Bentos steak and kidney pie. So this was a product line that I covered in, I think, episode 37, 39, somewhere around the high 30s of this series. So quite a while ago, 2017 in fact. I seem to recall we didn't find very much meat inside this pie. Now, subsequently to that, Fray Bentos, the brand, launched a kind of more meat in our pie marketing campaign. So I think in 2020, they launched a version of this pie and they said 33% more meat. This is the kind of later iteration of that product launch. So it still says it's the classic recipe. Better meat, more of it. So this has got more meat in it than the one I reviewed back in that episode in 2017. Let's have a look at the ingredients because there are some things to talk through here. So ingredients, we've got water, wheat flour, beef 15%, pork kidney 10%, palm oil, modified maize starch, rapeseed oil, salt, onion powder, barley malt extract, tomato paste, yeast extract, flavouring, beef extract, chicory extract, stabiliser, xanthan gum, sugar, colour, plain caramel, white pepper, tomato powder, emulsifier, mono and diglycerides of fatty acids, garlic powder. So, the other thing to note here actually is this little bit here that says, humble pie for us. We put our hands up. Our recipe has not been up to scratch lately, so we've brought back our classic steak and gravy recipe and are ready to reclaim our title as Dinner of Champions. So, that's interesting actually. How do you launch a product where you say, back to our classic recipe, we've made this better, but actually what we've really only done is made it like it used to be, without tacitly admitting we made it worse on purpose. Or, I mean, it's either you've got to admit that you've made it worse on purpose for the sake of economy, or you made it worse by accident, which means negligence. So I don't think there's really any good way to spin this. But anyway, I thought it'd be interesting just to compare the ingredients here to that pie back in 2017, because it sounds like, when they launched this, they said 33% more meat. And that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? But it's 33% more of a quite small value. So this has got 15% beef and 10% pork kidney. The previous version of this, back in 2017, had 12% beef and 9% pork kidney. So, yes, technically the truth, there is more meat in here, but not a lot more in terms of actual content. Anyway, we're going to open this up today and see if it does seem better, because it actually also says better meat as well as more of it. So, yeah, that's an admission. Either deliberately or negligently been buying worse meat. So, anyway, we're going to open this up. But there's more to talk about because there's another twist in the tale. Because, what's this? This was actually on sale alongside this one. And this is not old stock, because if we compare the best before end dates, this is the one with false contrition and more meat. This is January 2026. This is October 2026. So, oopsie. So, yeah, this whole thing about, well, we've put our hands up, our recipe has not been up to scratch lately. They've reduced the meat. And if we look at the ingredients on these, so this is the more meat one, 15% beef, 10% pork kidney. This one's back to 12% beef. But actually, interestingly, the pork kidney's gone up to 11%. So a tiny bit more kidney in there. Probably because the kidney is the cheaper ingredient, and so they can back off the beef and add a little bit more kidney, and perhaps it will still taste a bit more meaty than it used to. But yeah, so this whole story about them feeling some sort of shame about their recipe and remedying that has not lasted as long as perhaps it might. Anyway, we're going to open one of these. I'm not going to open this one because we know pretty much what to expect here. This is the one to evaluate against the episode 30 whatever it was, to see if we can perceive a greater quantity of meat in there. Now, the other thing that's different since I last opened one of these is I've got an oven that actually works properly now. So you're going to preheat the oven to fan 180 Celsius, bake for 30 minutes or until crust has risen and is golden brown. And I will try to observe the instructions as closely as possible, because this is a test of the instructions as much as it is of the product. Remove lid using a robust can opener. We highly recommend both the Brabantia Essential line, which is the one I commonly use, and OXO Good Grips openers, which is the one I don't use. And people keep still recommending me the OXO Good Grips. I have got one, although I just looked, it's not to hand. And people keep recommending them as being vastly superior because I think Alex on Technology Connections said so. I disagree. I respect him a lot, but I disagree with his view on that. I did open one of these pies with the OXO Good Grips once. And the problem with the OXO Good Grips can opener is where it cuts through the seam on the side here, which is notionally better in terms of safety. It cuts through the side here. The lid doesn't just pop off or fall in or whatever like it would do on a regular can opener. It stays in place. And as a result of that, you can find yourself going round more than once. And once you get past the point on that can opener where you've gone round more than once, it starts to shave off a razor sharp sliver of metal off the existing rim. And last time I used my OXO Good Grips on a Fray Bentos pie, I found a needle-like shard of metal in my food. So I've gone back to my trusty Brabantia, which has served me well, and I have no complaints about. Anyway, let's get this to the kitchen. We'll get it cooked. We're going to give it a taste. So, fan oven shall be heated to 180 Celsius, which is very pleasingly 180 degrees of angle as well on this dial. So we'll wait for that to preheat. Meanwhile, Brabantia Essential, as recommended by Fray Bentos, although I'm not sure why we should trust anything they say given their track record on honesty. And we have an intact lid. I'm not liking the look of that pink staining there. Although, hang on a minute, where was that? That was the bottom of the can. So there, yeah, that's just where it's been displayed that way up. And the gravy has kind of seeped through the pastry. I thought for a moment we might have been dealing with spoilage, but I don't think so. The top of the pastry on these things is a bit variable. Sometimes it's got like almost like a thumbprint or a hole in it, but here's an intact specimen. Okay, oven is up to temperature, so in we go, and timer is running. So that's time up. Yeah, I would say that that's probably done. I think if we go any further, we're likely to dry out the filling. There is always a trade-off with these pies. So whilst I think that pastry could stand to be a bit more brown than that, while that's all cooking, the filling is boiling away, and you saw steam coming out there. And so if we take it too far, what we'll end up with is a crispier crust, but a very dry filling. So I think I'm going to stop there. We'll allow a few moments of cooling. We'll get this back to the studio and give it a taste. Okay, well, there we go. So, pastry is crisp and golden on top. We can expect that the underlayers here will be soggy because this is puff pastry that's been in contact with the wet contents of the can for its entire lifetime so far. And of course, the nature of canning is such that this whole product has been cooked inside the can to preserve it. So the pastry's already been cooked before you bake it. I'm just going to loosen the pastry around the edge here. And I think we'll try and cut a kind of quarter of the pie. Okay, well, there are visible chunks of meat in there, and of course the usual gravy. So in all honesty, I don't think there's any discernible difference between this pie and how it used to be. If we look at those percentages in the ingredients, the increase is about 17 grams of meat in total. I'm really not sure I can see a difference. So let's just have a look at this pastry before we go any further. So yeah, we end up with a very crispy layer on top. Then under the layers are cooked, but quite doughy and soft. Now, this might be unappealing to some people, but for aficionados of this product, this is not a bug, this is a feature. And if you think about it, you know, this is boiled pastry, essentially, but what's pasta? Anyway, let's give that pastry a taste. Yeah, it's soft, and I suppose it's a bit like a dumpling, really. Think about the outer layer on gyoza, for example. Okay, so anyway, we've got meat here. There is a piece of kidney. There is a piece of beef steak. Let's give that a try. It's nice, lean, tender, tastes like brisket perhaps, or something like that. So yeah, chunks of steak and chunks of kidney. Need to taste this crispy top layer as well. I can taste the palm oil. Palm oil is widely held to be flavourless, but I can taste it. Now hang on a minute, because I've served this all wrong. The serving suggestion here is to balance it on a fork. Okay. So we'll have to get some bits of meat there. Served as suggested. Interesting, I forgot to mention also, the speech bubble on the other can, containing back to our classic recipe from the other can, was coming from the pie, so talking pie. So anyway, this whole fiction about we've made our product better than ever is obviously, I'm aware, this is a marketing thing. Interestingly, that used to be really common. I think it was back in the late 80s, early 90s. All of the confectionery in the shops went through a phase of saying it was 15% bigger, and often paired with the claim, bigger than ever. And those two claims, when taken together, so when you think 15% bigger, bigger than ever, that sounds like they've made a vast improvement. But of course, what's happened is over time there is attrition of the pack size. In modern terms, shrinkflation, but actually it's been around since long before it was called shrinkflation. So yeah, over a long period of time, a company makes their product gradually smaller by a half gram or a gram per month or whatever, until they get to a point where they can now increase it and say it's 15% bigger, and actually all they've done is restore it back to the original size. And of course, if they reduced it by a little bit less than that, they can say 15% bigger and also make the claim bigger than ever. But it's not 15% bigger than ever, it's 15% bigger than yesterday. It's actually perhaps only 0.5% bigger than ever. Well, so anyway, what's the verdict on this pie? It's not bad. We shouldn't expect these pies to be the same as a freshly baked pie. It is designed to stand in the cupboard until you want it, so it's a shelf-stable pie. If you don't have a lot of freezer space, for example, then it does offer a way of having a standby meal that is going to stay until you want it. The gravy is super gloopy, but quite satisfying. The flavour is meaty, it's a good taste. The pastry, like I say, something you're either going to love or hate, but people that like these pies do tend to really love them, actually, so, you know, more power to you if you know what you like. So yeah, that was the back to the original recipe, Fray Bentos pie. I actually think that maybe it still used to be more meaty than that in the old days. In the old days, these pies weren't necessarily Fray Bentos. They might have been Prince's. The brands have shifted and changed ownership over the years. So when these guys say that they're going back to their original recipe, there could be a little bit of liberal interpretation of what original actually means. I'm not going to open this one for comparison. I'm not the world's biggest fan of these pies. They are all right, but I don't want to keep on eating these things, so that one will go to the food bank. The contrition was more of a marketing thing. The little oops, sorry piece on the back of the label has now been replaced with a thing saying that they've got 64 pastry layers placed by hand. I don't know if that's what people really wanted to hear. I think I'd probably prefer to know that this was put together by a machine. But yeah, 64 pastry layers just means they've folded it 6 times. That was Fray Bentos steak and kidney, new old recipe. Oops, we made a mistake. Pie. Weird stuff in a can on atomic shrimp. I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.